Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at UC Merced. Sorry if you hear my dog. She's wandering around behind me. She's a little loud today. But I am happy to have a Q&A today with Brian Kateman from Reducetarian Foundation, and also the documentary Meet Me Halfway. And then Guillermo Ortiz is my colleague and coworker. I'll let him introduce himself as well. And then Brian, if you want to introduce yourself after that, that would be great.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Guillermo Ortiz. I'm the Sustainability and Diversity Educational Programs Manager here at UC Merced. I really cover the intersection of environmental justice, climate justice, and sustainability. In that effort, we set up these discussions, these AMAs, to really hear about different perspectives in the sustainability world. And so I'm so glad that Brian accepted our invitation to come and talk about his work, how he got into this space. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll let you introduce yourself further.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for scheduling this. Any opportunity to talk about Meet Me Halfway is very exciting to me because the documentary just came out a couple of weeks ago and has definitely been a labor of love working on it the past 5 years or so. I run a nonprofit organization called Reducetarian Foundation, which is focused on reducing societal consumption of animal products and ending factory farming. And as one of our initiatives, we created this documentary called Meet Me Halfway. So hopefully, it's only a couple people, so we might as well just talk a little. There's no worries if not, but it just helps me understand where we're at. Did you watch it, Christine and Mary? Have you seen it yet or no?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I haven't, but I will, I promise.
No, that's fine. It's good to know. Well, I'm happy to tell you about the film, but I'm also happy to answer any specific questions. So maybe Erin, if you have something in mind, you can kick us off. Otherwise, I love hearing the sound of my own voice. So happy to do what I can if that's helpful too.
Well, I have not quite a million questions, but I have a lot of questions. I'm really excited about this one.
Me too.
And every vegan has to introduce themselves. The first thing they say is like, "Hey, I'm vegan." So shout out. Everyone already knows I'm vegan. So I really appreciate this. Yeah, Christine too. I really appreciate this and your work and everything. But my first question is, how has the reception been with this film? Like with
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a very anxious person by personality, and while making the film, I was anxious throughout for many reasons. Making a film is very anxiety producing in general, and then completing it, the legal and finance and waivers, and there's just a lot of components that go into making a film. But as we were selecting content, I was really thinking about the different reactions that people were going to have. What is a vegan going to think about me visiting a farm where an animal is slaughtered? What is someone who is very concerned about their health and is not a fan of plant-based meat going to think when I visit folks like Beyond Meat? What is someone who's concerned about capitalism and biotechnology? What are they going to think about me looking at cellular agriculture? The idea that you can create meat directly from animal cells without the use of slaughtering animals. And what are people who love meat going to think about me telling them to eat less of it? I'm very happy to answer your question, and I will. But it's just to say that your position, let's say the position of being vegan or thinking the world should go vegan, I don't know if that's your position, but let's say it is just one reason why someone might get frustrated at my film, right? There's a lot of different components to it that people could be upset at. I have been very happy that in terms of the general perception, particularly from the press, but also people who've watched the film, there's a real understanding that we try to present all the different sides as fairly as possible, and that folks are welcome to come to their own conclusion about how they would like to transform our food system, whether asking people to eat less meat is enough, whether people should go vegan, whether a vegan world is a bad idea because we need regenerative agriculture. And in order to have regenerative agriculture, we need animal impact, which is what Will Harris at White Oak Pastures is up to. So, by and large, people view it as one of the few films in the food movement that it's relatively balanced and takes a kind of humble approach, in that it raises more questions than provides specific answers. Now the fun part of your question. I was feeling really good about that and what I just said for a couple of weeks. And then I did a little screening, and I heard that there were going to be vegan protesters at the screening. And I thought I was past that, because I have worked to build relationships with the vegan community over the years. And I think there's just been a general change in the tone of the movement, which is that it's relatively acceptable to ask people to cut back on animal products. Whereas when I first started this in 2014, I was getting a lot of hate email from a small sector of the vegan community. That person didn't show up to the event, so they wound up not protesting and coming. But I think that's the exception, Aaron. I really do. I think there's a small minority of people who take a very absolute position and morally, and believe that in order to enact that moral principle, that we must only pursue measures that are directly embedded, meaning anyone who's vegan is eating less meat. It's just that they've done so to a significant degree, but they may not be excited about asking folks to cut back. And Mary, when you see the film, there's a scene in there where there's a photo of protesters out protesting me speaking, and the photo says, Brian Kateman speaking at an animal rights conference is like Donald Trump speaking at a women's rights conference. is what it said. So anyway, but yeah, overall, genuinely, things have been quite smoothly. But yeah, there are people who believe that they have the silver bullet answer to a problem, and the one position I take is that comes from a place of misunderstanding that these problems are complicated. They require a diversity of strategies. And anyone that's against factory farming and believes that we should reduce societal consumption of animal products is more than okay with me.
Wow, there's so much in there that I wanted to comment on. In particular, agreed, it is a very balanced documentary, both from what you said, but I also really like that you look at the really big benefits and parts of the vegan movement, the vegetarian movement, the Reducetarian movement. You look at health benefits, animal welfare, environment. So you're really meeting people where they're at and, looking at all of those issues embedded in it. So I really appreciate that. And then being vegan on my own, just personally, I agree with the Reducetarian movement. I followed the foundation before this came out, so I'm really excited about this. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, so this is great. But I think any way we can get people to stop eating meat is a step in the right direction. Because I know that a lot of my peers, like my dad, first of all, he's never going to go vegan, but he might consider a meatless Monday. And that would be a win in my book, because he's never going to be full on vegan, never vegetarian. But if I can get him to just cut back a little bit, that's a win. And there are other people like that. There's other people that could go full on vegan. I could show them Earthlings or something, or even this film, and they would be like, done. Okay, vegan, cold turkey, bad metaphor potentially, but they can just go straight to veganism. So this film is great, I think, to help convert people just one step in the right direction. And then another note real quick too, when I was doing some marketing and promotion of this event, I posted in various Reddit channels and subreddits and everything. And I posted in the Reddit one or the vegan Reddit subchannel, and I got some pretty harsh feedback, and they were upset. Why are you promoting this event? It goes against everything. How dare they use some really harsh terms, getting into rape And they were saying, oh, so you condone this? So like, do you condone rape? And I'm like, oh my God, what? Remember talking about genocide and all of the other things where I get it, but also try telling that to the people you're trying to convert and they're going to run the other way. Like, I'm vegan, so like they didn't scare me away, but try using that argument for other people and they're going to come back and say, yep, crazy vegan. So it was just upsetting.
I think that raises a good point, Brian. I think that's one thing I've like learned over the course of my life. I'm coming from a policy and politics background. I used to work in the United States Senate for Senator Robert Menendez, working on housing and financial services policy. And obviously criticism is something that we encounter on a daily basis when we were little, to especially choosing a career in politics. You know, as a filmmaker, right, you're trying to present a vision and kind of paint this kind of nuanced argument, right? And so, you know, criticism is coming, you include it in the film. How do you personally approach criticism? Is it a positive force? When it gets toxic, how do you reserve for yourself some sense of peace? Because it's something that, you know, really any kind of person who's going to go out there and be creative, put something out in the world, is going to have to encounter in the future.
I really appreciate Aaron's comment and yours as well. Let me just say that there's this scene in which I go to a pig vigil and I hang out with vegans and animal rights activists. And it's a very emotional scene. I'm crying. And so, you know, I think there's a part of me that when I hear someone say like, oh, you know, we won't quote this in isolation, right? But like Aaron like loves rape, you know, like that's of course, you know. So when I hear the absurdity of the comment, and that's kind of my first reaction, right? And of course it is. But I also understand the place that vegans and animal rights activists are coming with, where they say, you know, do we really want to be slightly, you know, less cruel to animals? Are we really okay taking their life? You know, is it okay to just be nice on Mondays and not during the week? So I understand the intellectual argument. And quite frankly, if I was in a philosophy class or an animal rights class, or if I was sort of just talking about from an academic perspective, there's quite a lot of intellectual merit to the consistency that those people are asking for. But when you intersect with the real world, and you have to make pragmatic, what they would call compromising decisions, I would call them pragmatic, you know, the equation can change. So yeah, it would be perfect if there was no suffering in the world whatsoever, but given that that's not possible, despite my intellectual interest in that, my question is, how can we move in a direction that's more compassionate, more sustainable, more healthy, and so on. I like intellectual criticism. I have no problem with anybody watching the film and coming to the conclusion that they disagree with it on an intellectual level. They thought I was too nice to the plant-based meat people. They thought I didn't show, you know, enough of the downsides of cellular agriculture. Even to the point, let's say someone at a meat company saying that I'm underestimating the value that factory farm offers in terms of feeding the global poor, or employing lots of people, and so on. And I think there's all kinds of intellectual arguments, and I'm willing to have a conversation with anyone. I think where I get to negative emotions is, one, I don't like getting emails that say really nasty things about me personally. And that happens like, I wish you nothing but suffering. I wish you nothing but unhappiness. You're evil. You're an evil person. The assumption about a character, my voice is annoying, I'm anorexic, my body, these kinds of things do upset me. I wish they didn't. I also get scared. Like, I don't want people to come to my house or ruin my life or these kinds of things. But, you know, it borders on sort of paranoia, I think. But I don't, yeah. So, I have a mixed relationship with criticism. I'm an anxious person, and I don't like conflict that's sort of about, these primal insults at all. But in terms of intellectual contributions, I think it's cool. The other place I get frustrated is when people, again, go back into sort of philosophical land. I look at factory farming. It's 99% of animals in the United States are raised in those systems. The overwhelming are raised in internationally as well. So when people get into discussions around, you know, but broccoli is healthier than plant-based meat, or cell cultured meat is still part of capitalism, you know, shouldn't we end capitalism? I start to get a little frustrated personally because I look around and I think that anything that's not factory farming is significantly better. So if someone wants to end capitalism, let's say, that would be a perfectly fine position, but let's, you know, can we start by at least advancing cell cultured meat, and you can go out and do your activism around ending capitalism, and we can see each other 50 years from now, and we can start talking about a world where there's no factory farming, and maybe capitalism has been, you know, mitigated by some socialistic policies. So, you know, I think that's I hate when I see what's called horizontal hostility, the idea that people with overlapping concerns are more likely to argue with each other than they are to argue with someone who's diametrically opposed to them. It's very silly when vegans argue with me because they really should be focused on omnivores. They should be focused on Tyson and Purdue. I'm not a threat. The threat is the factory farming industry by comparison. So I don't know. That's my honest take on some valid criticisms and others that I think are a bit silly, and some that make me a bit uncomfortable too.
Well, I appreciate it. I think that's something we encountered a lot, obviously in the halls of the U.S. Senate. You'll see a lot of criticism and some really good intellectual debate, and some very, very not of that sort. But on the topic of, you know, painting a nuanced view of the issue that you identify, how do you go about doing the research, right, to go through that undertaking because like in the setting that you've chosen in doing a documentary, for example, like you have a set amount of time, right, to articulate your viewpoint or cover these topics. And so I always feel in any documentary, there's always a part of me that's like, they always have to leave something out, because like to cover these topics, you could do, you know, a documentary series for, you know, weeks and probably still have to areas that you still have to cover. So on your part, you're doing the research, you're figuring out how do I paint a really nuanced discussion here. How do you make the discussion of, like, even after the fact, like, oh, I should have put this in, or I should have put that in, because there's always more that you can talk about, right? It's the moderation that I feel like it gets difficult.
It's really tough. I mean, my co-director, apparently this is like a term that people use in the film industry. It's like killing your babies, they say, when you're having to cut content away. I know I made a film, but I don't consider myself a filmmaker. It's this weird thing, right? I do something once, it's hard for me to take on that title. So I'm still ignorant about most of filmmaking experience. You know, it's funny, like in 2015, when I started having this kind of idea, originally it was a very simple film. It was people should eat less meat, telling people to go vegan's nuts. Sorry, Aaron. And we should just show people who, and Christine, right? We should show people who have made the decision to cut back on meat, and look how much weight they've lost. And it was really simple. And what happened is I started to learn more. I was like the perfect level of knowledgeable and ignorant when making this film. I had enough knowledge that I could make something that I was intellectually proud of, but I was ignorant enough that I could learn along the way. And there were moments where that genuinely happened. You know, the pig vigil, I had never been to a pig vigil before. I really didn't want to go. It was deeply upsetting. I never hung out with a guy like Will Harris. I've never been to Georgia. There's guns all around me. I mean, there were guns on his, in the car. It was just everywhere. I'm not used to that, right? It's just not my normal scene. So there were things that genuinely made me uncomfortable, and that was really good for the film, and it was honest. And the more I started to do that, the more I learned, and the more honestly humble I became, right? Like I met Will kind of thinking like, I don't know how I feel about, slaughtering animals in a kinder way. But you meet someone in person. It's not an idea anymore. As a physical human, he's an amazing man who's done an incredible thing with his life, moving away from factory farming. And you start to find yourself feeling challenged, and it complicates your simple worldview. So I think if I had made the film in 2015, it would have been much simpler, probably less intellectually valid, but it has some advantages, simplicity. I don't know what you do, Christine, but I imagine Mary has written articles where like you have so many word counts, right? So the more nuance you add, the more the word count goes, the harder it is for the reader to understand. So I think we did the best job we could trying to stuff as much information as possible. And it's quite a lot, quite frankly, compared to most films. But there's a bonus scene actually, which most people haven't seen. If you purchase the film on iTunes, there's a bonus scene where I go visit Will Harris, and I go visit another farmer named Helen who does regenerative agriculture, but using veganic practices. And we really wanted to include that in the film, but it's just one step too far away from the central premise. So we removed that. That was an example of us removing something that adds a layer of complexity that's intellectually true, but just too much for the average person to understand in another 3 minutes. So you can just imagine, to answer your question, Journey and I sat in a room and we argued and debated and we agreed at various points about cutting different segments. And it was very hard. I'm lucky that I generally assume I'm making mistakes. So I rely on a lot of people to look at stuff and give feedback and then do the best job I can. So we had screenings. My wife gave me very, very, very hard feedback to hear in the beginning where the film sucked. And it was very painful to hear, but I'm grateful for her and others who did that. And sorry, last thing I'll say, someone said to me, she said that your film's all over the place, it's not structured at all. What you should do is ask yourself this: what is the question that you want to answer? One question, write it out. And what I finally landed on was 2 questions. Why is it so difficult to get people to eat less meat? And given that, what other alternatives to factory farm meat are out there? That was what I kept trying to come back to. So, sorry, long-winded answer, but there you have it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Christine, I feel bad we haven't heard from you. Are you dying to ask any questions, or you're good?
I'm good. I just really want to make a comment. I love that you interviewed your folks, because, I can relate to that so much. And my dad has now become semi-vegan. Never thought that would happen in my wildest days. We farm. And so, I come from a really different world. My brother and I both worked in entertainment and come from the farming industry. So it's really kind of a unique situation. And a lot of our friends do not understand us,
What did you farm? Or
we raise almonds, wheat, corn, and alfalfa. Our alfalfa goes to dairy cows, and my brother and I have a difficult time with that. So working on getting my dad to change, trying to go more towards horses. But it is a crop that's paying more money these days than a lot of other things. And farming is not an easy industry to be in. Right. But I just feel like I live in such a unique world where I have all these farming friends, and they don't understand the way I eat or live at all, And then I have my friends in LA who are the opposite, So we have the Democrats and we have the Republicans, right? I mean, we have political, a lot of everything is different, religion, political, food. But I find myself explaining myself a lot. And I just really appreciate someone like you doing, it's not so extreme, the Reducetarian movement, right? And so I think you can meet more people in the middle. And I understand that. A big part of me would love for the world to go vegan and we never hurt another animal again or human, but it's not realistic, right? So,
yeah, not today.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of what you're doing. We're looking at doing more of the regenerative ag. So that's another thing that I'm working on. I've gotten far away from the animal agriculture. I have more of a sanctuary. I have sheep out here that just are living out their retirement years because I no longer allow anybody to kill anything on our place, but yeah, thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. And
oh, that's so nice. No, my parents are like the stars of the film in my mind because they
are.
They particularly my dad, but I appreciate my parents a lot because they help me understand a person who's different than me, and to think about this, if there is a sort of average American, which is a loaded term, but they certainly come close, and they provide a perspective to me that I otherwise would not have. And I think everyone has different relationship with their parents, right? So in my 20s, I found being their son difficult. Early 20s, it's like the awakening. My parents aren't perfect. They have a different, but then I kind of went to therapy to work through my relationship with my parents, which I encourage many people to do, especially if they have difficult backgrounds. And you learn to understand, you learn to forgive, you learn to have compassion that they're just people. They're just people with their own set of circumstances, their own life, even when you diametrically disagree with folks. And so that's a gift that my parents gave me. And that's really, I think, the ethos of the film. And even when you disagree with someone, and I have friends across the political spectrum, and even when I vehemently disagree with them, they're still good people. They are. They're coming from a place of, not every single person, but a lot of people are coming from a place of good values. But we disagree a lot on what that should be, what that should look like. And I think there's certainly a time for compassion and for understanding, and to still not give up on your principles, but to at least, don't necessarily hold hate in your heart. Regenerative agriculture is really interesting. That is the component that was kind of, we went with the Helen, and it's interesting, right? Because there's a lot of mixed science on it. It's difficult to scale. There is a lot of evidence to suggest that some farms are able to sequester more carbon, which is good for climate change and water. But it requires a lot more land per animal, which is not good for environmental considerations. I feel like the jury is still out on some of these questions, but it's better than factory farming in my mind in aggregate. So it gets my vote. So yeah, but Will Harris was that was the feedback I got most from vegans. They were they didn't agree with Will Harris on a lot of his views, which I can understand given their perspective.
Well, he was very disturbing, I will say.
You found him disturbing?
I found it very disturbing, but that is something, I came from that background. So I was an animal science major and wanted to be a beef lobbyist. My grandparents had sheep that came over from the Basque Country.
Wow.
I came from an animal background and
Wow.
went to way too many slaughterhouses. Harris Ranch was the last place I ever saw that ever happen. I saw veal calves being killed, and I can't even tell you how disturbing that was. So killing an animal in a humane way makes no sense to me. But I see where you're coming from, and I understand there are people that we need to meet everybody in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, and it is worth something, Will's, I mean, the farm was just incredible. I mean, besides the slaughter, which sucked, to put it mildly. And that's kind of what I said to Will. I was like, my concern is that you're an incredible person. What average person could create this Disneyland experience of farming? I mean, it's so, it's so rare. I mean, he has to have one of the best farms in the world. So it's we can't feed the world on that. But if you're gonna buy meat, it's definitely a better option.
I agree. I also follow a lot of doctors, and I come from the world that I believe that meat is actually toxic to us. I really believe that's a big part of why we're all sick.
Well, now I'm glad you brought that. And Aaron, are we good? We go 5 minutes over? Are you okay with that?
I've got all day, all night. So
all right, folks can.
as long as we want.
Folks can drop off there, but I think Mary will be interested in this. My reply to Christine. that's actually a place I disagree with you on. I
Okay.
think that this got more fun. But the cool thing is we both agree that people need to eat way fewer animal products. I don't think anybody thinks that people are eating too many fruits and vegetables on average. So like, that's the baseline. That's where I'm at with my parents, right? Could you please have some broccoli, have an apple once in a while, like bare minimum. Okay. So now we're in philosophical land because where most people eat McDonald's and Burger King and so on. But I don't think there's a ton of evidence to suggest that a vegan diet is necessarily better than a vegetarian diet, or a vegetarian diet is significantly better than a flexitarian diet. I think the evidence suggests that a whole plant-forward diet is good. But once you start getting in these little micro areas, I start to be a little bit skeptical. I mean, I don't actually know if you disagree with this, but if you do, I'd love to hear it. I think that it causes me pause a lot because I meet people who come into the vegan movement purely from a health perspective, and they view one piece of bacon as being not good for their body, and I'm quite skeptical of that position. And I'd love to if you have thoughts on that, or if Mary has thoughts on that, because I know Mary has written about health and also has gone through the experience, if I recall, of experimenting with a vegan diet. Mm-hmm. So we have someone who can speak to her experience as well. Not to put you on the spot, Mary, just if you're excited.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. I agree with you. I haven't seen, and I don't want to say, Christine, that you're wrong, because you may not be, but I haven't seen a lot of evidence either that some moderate amount of meat, eggs, cheese, whatever, is harmful. I think if you are talking about like the average American diet, absolutely not helpful. I mean, the balance is completely off, and this is where I sort of wanted to go, but the cost of the meat that most people eat bears almost no relationship to what it would actually cost to raise animals, as we all know. That the subsidies make it financially attractive to families who are very concerned about how much they're spending on everything, food included. And I think that's a big piece of what's going on. If we actually had to pay for what we ate, people would, I think, change pretty quickly, because it would just be untenable for most people. So I don't know. I am not a vegan, but I have no problem with anyone being it. I guess where I wanted to go from there was what you think, Brian, about two issues that are very connected to in my mind, choice. So why are we inventing these fake meat products? Why are we trying to create meat proteins, on a computer? Like these things to me make virtually no sense, except from the equation of like, oh, if I'm going to become a vegan, I don't want to have to give up hamburgers, right? But I don't want to eat animals, so I'm going to eat this really strange stuff, and put a lot of ketchup and mustard and pickles on it, and then it will be fine. And so the far other end of that is the dollar menu at all these fast food places where wealthy people get to choose what they want to eat. Poor people don't always get that choice, but now I can go get a burger, fries, and a Coke or something for $1. Well, hey, that seems kind of great. So, and I don't think it's realistic to ask every person to think very deeply about the ingredients, or like to look at their hamburger and, go through this whole theoretical, philosophical thought process of where did all these ingredients, not just the meat, but how was the wheat grown, and how much, pesticides are on these wheat plant farms. And, I think there's a lot of, it's very much a gradation. It's not just all this stuff is farmed great and it's great and you should eat it, and all this stuff is are animals that are raised in bad ways or even sometimes in okay ways, but then they're killed, right? I think that the continuum is much more than this or that.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Well, again, I do, and the film takes the perspective that plant-based meat, despite its limitations, which I want to talk about, are still way better than factory farm meat. And for me, because of that, it's enough. And it comes from, again, anything that's better than factory farming, even mildly, I vote for yes. And then one day I'm ready to get plant-based meat off the menu if we can get them to eat broccoli. But I do come from that. But I still think it's an important discussion. The reason plant-based meat exists, it's a compromise with consumers. You are unwilling to give up meat, but here's the thing: we have an alternate product that tastes like meat or almost tastes like meat, has the general texture of it. It
bleeds, right? Like if you're against killing animals, but you instead want to buy something that's not from animals, but still bleeds like animal food.
Well, most vegans don't like all that fake meat, I think. It's vegans. You're talking about the more middle of the road person, right?
Perhaps. I don't have any of the sales knowledge on who's buying those products, but
there are some vegans who they are supportive of plant-based meat, but they don't want to eat it themselves because it reminds them too much of animal slaughter. But I think that from the strategic perspective, it's they're actually, quite frankly, the lever that's being pulled is more about health. They're arguing that, and in the environment, and to some extent animals, but I think health is really the lever that a lot of these companies are using. They're saying, we really know you like red meat, it's not good for your heart and over consuming it. Have something that's a bit lighter, have something that's a bit kinder to the planet. And particularly among younger people who care about the planet more than people like my dad, who you'll see in the film. Here's a compromise. And I think that, and it comes from a place of assuming that most people choose food based on price, taste, convenience. They're not necessarily even choosing food based on ethics.
Right.
But their own health, they might be motivated to make changes.
It's a very particular place, right? I mean, for many, many years, we've had patties made out of, whatever, beans, mushrooms, other kinds of, garbanzos, whatever.
They were too healthy.
Those are available.
They're too healthy though for the average person.
Well, you make it, that there are now such products served in restaurants that actually taste good. They don't bring to mind this sort of hippie brown rice idea. And I don't know, I find it interesting that what is being made is fake meat, not a patty that if you're at a barbecue, and everyone's having things in round rolls, you can have something too. It doesn't have to be fake meat. It can be something that, is made from actual food.
I mean, look, so as much as I love Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and so on, I prefer a whole plant-based kind of veggie burger. I like Dr. Prager's. For me personally, I like the more healthy ones. But if you see my parents in the film, they have guacamole for the first time, and they lose their minds because it tastes so disgusting to them. If you add a lot of actually, just to push this even further, I wrote an op-ed for Fast Company a couple months ago, arguing that I was worried about the fact that Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods were making their products healthier. They were reducing sodium, they were reducing fat, and it concerns me because I think the proposition for these folks is have something that tastes absolutely delicious.
Right.
And it'll be better for the planet. It'll be better for animals. And it even might be marginally better for your health. Overall, it's good though. I'm concerned that they're trying to appeal to people on too far on the basis of health. And that it'll discourage people like my dad from eating it. And so but it's like these weird mixed incentives at times, right? Because if you care a lot about people's health, you're going to view plant-based meat or even cell-cultured meat as not being great for people. It's a step in the wrong direction.
Right. At least skeptically.
Right. Whereas I'm less concerned personally. I'm more concerned about the environment and animals. And I think there's some slight advantages to eating plant-based meat over animal-based meat. But you know, Mary, the other thing, plant-based meat is 1% of the market right now. So it's so small that it's even a question around whether can we get it up. The almond milk, for example, or sorry, plant-based milk. I can't remember if it's almond milk or plant-based milk, is at 14% of the market, which is pretty substantial. Will plant-based meat ever get that high? I'm kind of skeptical. And I think it relates a little bit to what you're asking. It's like, what is the exact market for this product and how large is it?
And the biggest question of all is, do we need all this choice? Right. Which is true in many parts of our food consumption.
I mean, I know vegetables aren't doing it for people. I don't know what choice to give them exactly, but I know what's out there is there are people who say the answer, and whenever someone says the answer, I already am skeptical, but because I always think it's and not or, but I think significant investment should be made in policy, removing subsidies, holding companies accountable in terms of diluting our taste buds such that we're addicted to salt and fat and sugar. Because I think, encouraging, parents to feed their young kid, because I grew up on soda and chips. I never had vegetables, so it took so much time for me to disassociate my taste buds from that. It would be and that's why when my parents have guacamole, which by the way it was processed, so it already had probably extra salt and extra sugar in it, they still didn't like it. So I don't know. It's like, it's how much do we compromise? How much do it's really challenging, particularly from a health perspective, because if you care about people's health, they really should be having more whole fruits and vegetables, not plant-based meat.
So the last time I looked, there was a very steady percentage of people in the United States who were vegan. Is that still the case, or has it changed any?
It's like 1%.
And it stays there, right?
And it's not, to be honest, it's not actually 1%. I think half of them are lying. I think half of them occasionally include animal products in their diet, based on other data I've seen around people who say they're vegan but aren't actually, for what it's worth.
Like my kosher friends who occasionally have bacon.
Exactly. They're kosher forward.
Yeah.
What do you think, Christine? There was a lot in there.
Quick question. Yeah, you interviewed Eric Adams, and I just listened to him on Rich Roll, and
I became the mayoral candidate because of me.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I'm really intrigued by this man. And have you listened to some of the things that he's wanting to do? And he's pretty extreme. And if he gets in, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Extreme on what?
Oh, where he's wanting to go into these boroughs and completely change all of the subsidized food that's given out to people, completely changing that to a vegan diet, taking away a lot of these. And in schools, in the school systems, in the prison systems, I mean, he's wanting to really radically change all of that, anything that is given as, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I like the idea of using institutional levers to make it easier for people to have plant-based food, and, hospitals, university campuses. The more I learn about the school systems and how they are involved with food, including the USDA's dietary guidelines, it's the more overwhelmed and complicated I find it. Every time I look at that, I start to need to feel like I need a PhD in order to understand it. It's so nuanced. But I think there is obviously a benefit for, schools and whatnot to having more plant-based meals. And if it's positioned as a health benefit to students, I think it could be relatively, achievable. It relates to something Mary said about choice, which is people don't like being choices taken away from them, especially in the United States. So I don't know what the reaction will be. It really depends how far he's able to take it. I think I can't remember. I thought New York City schools were already doing, some of them were already doing like a meatless Monday day under de Blasio. So
this just seems a little bit more extreme. He's a little bit more like Cory Booker.
I see. I'm actually just curious to see if he's actually extreme, whatever that exactly means. If he's willing to go far, I'm curious to see how far he can take it until the system starts to block him from and the people start to block him from doing those things. But you know, he seems like seems like a strategic guy, and he seems like he has a connection to the, you know, to the average person. Something we don't do endorsements of political figures or anything, but I watched him on Bill Maher, for example. He seems like he gets what the average person goes through. So hopefully he's able to combine that reality with the principles he has around food, and it'll, you know, it could be a win for New York City and the world. But
I'm really curious because I'm surrounded by dairy farmers out here, and the amount of dairy that is put into everything, you know, I mean.
Where did you say you're based?
La Grande, California, right in the center part of California, about 30 minutes from UC Merced.
Got it.
Right in the Central Valley, surrounded by dairies, large dairies, and they infiltrate into every part of society. Milk is.
Got it. Yeah, I guess I don't appreciate, I forget, like, to me, Eric Adams seems like just a normal guy who's trying to make more fruits and vegetables, you know, accessible. But I can understand my bias, and there's another side to that equation, particularly a dairy, like those milk cartons in school. I mean, that was growing up, that's so iconic.
Yes. And all the foods have everything from whey to non-fat milk to butter to, you know, regular milk. I mean, it's just everything is coming from a dairy cow. And
the person, Audrey, that I interviewed in the film is like my go-to expert.
Yeah.
She has an organization called Balanced, and I go to her for questions around, you know, various policies in the school system. But it's another example of a form of advocacy that we need. You know, my college campus at the College of Staten Island, it was literally, you know, chicken tenders, hamburgers, French fries. I mean, there were no salads, laughable on Staten Island, New York. Now things are starting to change a little bit. It's cool that it's so much easier to eat less meat now than it used to be, right? It's way easier to be vegan than it used to be. So
I just wish we could get rid of the subsidies. And I'm a farmer, you know, we get subsidies, all of us do.
I have a question about that, and we'll say goodbye in 9 minutes.
Okay.
I actually have come across data that suggests, and I can send this to people, and I'm curious what you think. The data I've seen on subsidies suggests that it has a minimal effect on the actual price of food, meaning that if there were no subsidies for meat, for example, and I don't remember exactly, but we're talking, it was cents that the product would change in price. It was really small. And I keep asking people, and I've written a couple economists about this because I'm so perplexed by, there's a big narrative around subsidies as a major issue. And I understand it kind of like it probably pads the wallets of these meat producers anyway and allows them to do more marketing and other things. But in terms of the end cost of the product, it's something that I'm confused about. And I come from a place of ignorance, on humility, on not knowing exactly. But I just wanted to put that out there. That there's a couple of sources that suggest that the price wouldn't change that much. If you have experience receiving subsidies, maybe you can tell me what that's like, and that can educate us. What do you think about subsidies?
I do believe it's padding the pockets. It's very much like the the beef checkoff. You know, so many cents of every head goes to for marketing. And that's what it is. A lot of the money
for you. Like, how does it change your relationship to your food? If you were to lean into that, that's.
Well, I want to get rid of the subsidies. I really just don't think we need them. I think people rely on them a lot, but I think that we can get away from it, but that we have to improve our marketing, especially internationally, you know, because the amount of money that it costs for an almond or for a hamburger or whatever is so different from what the producer actually gets. You know, that's part of the biggest problem, you know. So the government comes out and pads everybody. But, you know, most of the subsidies around me all go to dairy and cattle. And during COVID, it was just unreal how much money was going to the livestock industry.
But when you say that when I say like it pads the wallets, what impact do you think that? Do you have a sense of what impact this has? Or is it just allow these companies to do more. I mean, I understand the checkoff programs allow them to do actual marketing.
Part of it is I think it's allowing these small guys to continue. So I have mixed feelings on this because I really can't stand factory farming and I want the little guy to stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
So without the subsidies, I think we're going to lose a lot of the little guys because of the way marketing is done, you know. And, you know, a lot of us small farmers are just getting swallowed up by these huge conglomerates. And they are taking the subsidies just, I mean, the amount of subsidies that are given to these huge farmers is just unreal. You know,
that's another fun
but
side.
the whole system is so broken, you know.
Right. That's another side fun comment. Again, I'm in the horizontal hostility land because I think all of these things are better than not, but because we're all informed people. So now we're picking apart these things. But
right.
Another criticism of plant-based meat is that it could become a semi-monopoly, a near monopoly. And I wrote about this in another article for Forbes that, you know, Beyond Meat and some of these other companies, they control like 70% of the plant-based meat market. So isn't it funny when we criticize the meat industry for being highly concentrated? It's like 80% of meat comes from 4 companies. Yeah. You know, we could see a similar situation with plant-based meat. So again, if you're against corporatization of food and your monopolies, you start to get concerned about plant-based meat. For, you know, as you know, for me, I think that's a fine cost to pay if it means having factory farming ending. But it's so funny to me how it always comes back to like how almost optimistic you are about the world. It's this strange thing. It's like, if you think it's possible to get people to eat fruits and vegetables, if you think it's possible to get rid of, you know, the corporatization of world, if you think we can do these grand big things and in a reasonable amount of time, if we just all decided that this was a good thing to do, you're going to be against some of these more pragmatic measures. If you are, if you take a different position, which is like, you know, more, I suppose, more cynical or more realistic or wherever you want to put it, you start to embrace more middle of the road policies. And you see this with political candidates, right? You see it with, you know, if you liked Bernie, you probably were more hopeful around, let's get rid of, you know, various forms of capitalism. Or if you liked Biden, even if you were a progressive, you know, you might think, well, Biden can actually get stuff done, whereas Bernie can, and they'd say. And so it's hard. And it relates to many different things, even if you want to get vaccinated or not. You know, I know people who don't want to get vaccinated. I'm fascinated by them personally. And maybe there's someone here who doesn't want to get vaccinated. And it's, you know, the more I talk, the more I forget, these are good people, just different perspectives, different concerns. So it's the film highlights, I think, in kind of summary, how it can be very challenging to come to a dinner table or come to a hangout, talk to people who disagree with you on lots of different things. But if you can find points of commonality, that's something, in my opinion, that we should lean into. Let's work together on the stuff that we can get done. Most people hate factory farms. That's good enough for me. And then, you know, we'll come back on this Zoom 10 years from now, 50 years from now, God willing, 100 years from now, as long as we're alive. And once factory farm is done, you know, we can say, you know what, maybe we should cut back on the plant-based meat. Maybe we should cut back on the cell cultured meat. Maybe now is the right time to start getting people to eat more fruits and vegetables. I don't know. So anyway, that's my...
Hopefully we have the time.
What'd you say?
I said, hopefully we have the time.
That's right. Yes.
It worries me.
Yes, that is a real factor. If you're deeply concerned about climate change and you think it poses almost an existential threat in the near future, that's another thing that will make you like Reducetarian type of policies less, because you'll feel more urgency around, we have to get this done immediately. And that, you know, it's funny. Like, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you have a conference coming up, right? Or in October in San Francisco?
You know, we do, but I'm actually, we're under a review to decide whether or not we're going to move forward. So I don't want to misinform you at this moment. It is possible we will move forward, but things are a little bit in flux right now with Delta and San Francisco. So we're going to have to make a game time decision in a week or two. But
it's going to be my question. Is it going to be in person?
Oh, it definitely won't be online. If we don't have it, we're not going to have it at all. But I hope it happens. And if it doesn't, we'll be back hopefully next year. And the film is happening. We have a book coming out called Meet Me Halfway, which is the book version of the film.
Okay.
And we'll continue to do the best we can, given the realities of the world. But I'm really grateful you came to this, all of you. Thanks for everything you're doing to advance the mission of a healthy, more compassionate, more sustainable food system. Despite whatever diverging views we may have, we have much in common. And hopefully this is the start of many more conversations to come.
Thank you. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thanks, Aaron, for organizing this. It was really
Yeah.
good.
Aaron, you want to close this out?
Yeah, I have a quick question though. When is the book released? Do you know?
I do. We haven't really talked about it much, but it comes out April 22nd, 2022. 2222.
Isn't that Earth Day?
It probably is, and it's probably because the marketing team at the publisher is on it. But I don't know that. But it probably is.
I think it is. That's very good.
Oh, good.
So thank you so much for answering all of our questions. I have so many more, but I'll let you all go. I really appreciated this conversation. It was thought-provoking, interesting, made me smile. It also made me cringe at some of the points. Thinking about animal welfare just makes me sad in general. But this was great. And I'm so happy we did this. And it was kind of nice that there's only a couple of people. I feel like that was really intimate. So thank you all for coming. Thanks to Brian for answering our questions. Guillermo, thank you for hopping on. And Mary and Christine, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great one, everybody.
Ton of fun.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.